It was working.
Yeah. I was working perfect.
It's just not projecting.
Right.
There we go. Yes, we got it.
Ready? Reset? All set. Meeting's called to order. We have one regular agenda item tonight, and that is the Manitoma Woodland subdivision. The final plan application has been submitted, and we're looking at that tonight for completeness only. And as everybody will remember, because this is a major subdivision, there are several phases to the application process. We approved some time ago the preliminary plan application, and the final plan application has now been submitted, and the process is the same for it. So we will determine completeness and then talk about holding a hearing and then ultimately board deliberation and a decision. So the same process as for the preliminary, except this is the final plan. I do want to mention that I had a brief conversation with Mr. Banky. He had a couple of questions about process, and we went over this, and so I think we're all on the same page with regard to process at this point. And there was some additional written material that was submitted by Mr. Banky on behalf of the Manitoma Association. But substantively, we will not be getting into a discussion about that tonight, because our focus again is strictly on completeness of the application this evening. I'd like to start, as we usually do, with a brief presentation from the applicant, a summary of the application, and I think it would be particularly helpful if you could highlight any areas where we've, this has gone through a number of iterations. Obviously, we've talked about a number of these issues several times, but if you could highlight in your summary, particularly where there have been changes and additions as a result of past comment and discussion. So with that, I would invite you up.
I'd like to thank you. My name is Walter, for the record, with Peyton and Development Consultants. Tanner Burnett is here with me tonight. He has done much of this work. I also like to mention that John Lawrence is here tonight with Lovejoy Ventures, and so is Jim Amendor. Oh, I messed that up. I tried to say that smoothly. It didn't come out. I'm sorry, Jim. I want to start tonight with an apology. I think I brought the weather with me. Sorry. Yeah, you don't help me out. But thank you for braving the roads, coming out tonight. That's above and beyond the call. I really appreciate it. I think we've managed to get through this winter with all these meetings without snowy Tuesday night until April, of course. You have in front of you this application packet. And in that, I'd like to point out a few things. This is the final application package. It's pretty thin. There's not a lot of stuff in there because everything was already previously submitted in the preliminary process. I'll go over that briefly. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, so it'll be quick, I think. The first section, right underneath the thin cover, that is just a narrative letter for you that covers all the points required in the code for final application. It goes right down through it by code, A, B, C, all the way down to the last page. And we address each and every one of those, all the way down to item K. It addresses each and every one of those, where that material can be found, and what the plan is for that. So if you're looking for completeness, you can start right there. It's all listed out for you. Under tab 1, you will find a reference, a list of references. We talked about, do we need to resubmit all the preliminary application materials? I worked with Chip on that. The answer came back, from the board that no, we do not need to resubmit all the same material all over again. We can just simply reference them, and that it might actually be helpful because there was a lot of reiterative submissions during the preliminary process. And so at least now, it references it, not just, where in the preliminary application it is, but what version. So you have the date and the version of the materials, that tell you, where to find that if you want to go back and look at something. On tab 2, there was one item, when we went down through the list to go find everything and tell you right where it was, there was one item we just couldn't find, we didn't know what happened to it, so we resubmitted it. So, it's, item under tab 2, it's simply your land use zoning map, that's all it is, showing where the property is. I think you all know where the property is, doing on sidewalks, but we wanted to make sure that material is in there. Item 3 is a discussion on performance guarantee. We are making the argument that a performance guarantee is not required because there's no public infrastructure on this project at all. This is all on private property, private roads, or it may be in the public right of way, but it's privately built roads, privately maintained roads. So that item 3 is our submission on performance guarantee. And item 4, we talk about the revised declaration and of restrictive covenants. So there's the list of that, as well as draft road association. Whereupon to solve the issue of the 425 feet of Neotoma Camp Road, what we're gonna do there? Lovejoy Ventures and the road association will take control of it as far as maintenance and reconstruction and bringing it up to town code and then maintaining it thereon. It's all in the road association there, those draft documents. Item 5 is simply the plan that you see in front of you. There it is. Very similar to the plan that you already have. We added some of the things required for final plan review, such as signature blocks, and legends, and 50-foot marks for E911 numbering, and a number of things that was required in the final application. So you have that revised plan. The rest of the plans are just like the preliminary plan. And then lastly, there was a separate submittal that went in to an email to the town about the road association. It's a letter from McCullum and McCullum, attorneys at law, just to help identify that, hey, we are going to upgrade and maintain that 425 feet of road. So they have a letter from them on that. I believe that's the submission. You'd like me to highlight a few things on the plan? We talked a long time about stormwater and a pond and a level spreader. We haven't changed any of that. It's still the same as it is, was finally done in the preliminary application. Pond, swale, level spreaders, etc. Same with the fire pond. There's still fire pond volume there, with a dry hydrant to pull off of it. Road signs have stayed the same.
And back to the pond for just a minute,
Sure.
we had the conversation about upgrading it in certain respects and including the weir in the design.
The weir is there.
And is that referenced specifically in your list of submissions where that can be found? That,
It is listed in the under tab 1. Help me out, Tanner. Yeah, I know you're scanning. I can see you at the corner of my eye over there. Through the page. It's there somewhere. I'm gonna find it for you. While he's looking for that, I'm gonna flip over and show you the drawing.
I believe that was actually referenced during the submission. Items, but the change is still there, and we're still included in the fire.
and so where is that plan found? Is that listed in this list?
If it's not, it was included in the last final preliminary submission. in February.
So here's the plan. Thank you, Tim. Here's the plan, there's the pond, the outlet, C6.1, drawing C6.1 has a weir control structure, and it's called out and detailed. That is drawing C6.1. And it is dated 2025, February 4th.
I have a question concerning Mr. Attorney McCullum's letter.
Yeah.
It's in the record, the one dated March 31st. I think I understand it, but I want to be sure. The second paragraph of Attorney McCullum's letter says that you, that's John Lawrence, as developer, will initially be responsible for the maintenance or repair costs of both Juniper Lane and the 400 and the Manitoba Camp Road. Then talks, the next sentence points out that, of course, once lots are sold, the lot owners will be responsible for their proportionate share. They'll be responsible to the association, right? The association, however, still has legal liability or legal responsibility for maintaining the roads, correct?
Yeah.
So we're talking, that sense only deals with the pro rata obligations to the association, doesn't relieve the association of any obligations.
No, I don't think so, and I don't think that was the intent. I'm not Mr. McCallum or a lawyer. Which is probably a good thing.
Unfortunately, I'm the latter, but no, I don't think he meant that, but I just wanted to affirm in some confirmation that the association will remain responsible in terms to us, to the town, to whatever, to maintain what had those portions of the that are discussed.
Yes, that is the intent, and I believe the road association documents under tab 4 say that. I did read them, it's been a years, but I believe that they say that they will be responsible for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And there are other questions, board members.
I have a question about roads.
Go ahead.
I was looking at Article 10, dealing with road standards, and in Section 3C of Article 10, it talks about road construction of any road as part of site review. And it requires that it be reviewed and approved by the road committee prior to final project approval by the planning board. So I think that's something that we'll need for the next meeting. I think I'm reading it correctly. It's Article 10, Section 3C, the last sentence. Or the second to last sentence.
Very clear.
So, Jack, you're looking at section 4.
Page 123. Section
Oh, okay, section 3A.
3C.
C, 3C as in cat.
Okay.
So it applies to any proposed road construction subject to the provisions of this article.
Yeah.
And then it requires.
Okay, so for those of you that don't have it in front of you, it says any proposed road construction, this is from, this is Article 10 of the land use ordinance, which is road standards. This piece, 3C states, any proposed road construction subject to the provisions of this article including roads for acceptance by the town as a public way or as a private road as part of a subdivision, on or after the date of acceptance of this ordinance, shall be designed by a licensed professional engineer. The design must be consistent with the design standards set forth in this article and Appendix A, and any applicable standards pursuant to Article 6, Section 3. For development proposals requiring site plan review by the planning board, all road-related design plans must be reviewed and approved by the road committee prior to final project approval by the planning board. All road development must be constructed as approved. So, I think this didn't float to the surface for any of us until just now. So,
That's okay.
it is clear that that needs to happen,
It sure does.
given this provision. So, you can talk with Chip about getting, the plans to the road committee. Do it through Chip.
Absolutely, we will do that. We'll get Chip as many plans and copies. Chip, do you sit on that board, I assume, the committee? No? How often do they meet? Is there a schedule?
Once a month, I think.
Yeah, I don't.
Once a month, maybe.
Yeah.
Eric's the road commissioner, so.
Yeah.
We should be able to work that out.
Very good. Thank you, Jack.
Okay.
Other questions? Anyone? Questions?
Just a question about the road association taking care of this road. So nobody else? Like Meredith, if there was a house across the street, they're not responsible for any of the costs of that first 25, just these 9 houses are gonna pay for that.
That is what we're proposing, that at a minimum, we will, when I say we, I mean the road association. That for the bylaws of which you have in front of you, will take care of that 425 feet. They gotta take care of everything else anyway.
Right.
So they'll take care of the 425 feet. If at a later time, the road association says, no, we want some help in doing this, so be it. They can do that if they wanna ask later. But for now, that's the proposal. We meaning the road association, will upgrade the road and maintain the road. All the way out to Lane Road.
So at some point in the future, the people that already live there can get hit with the cost of maintaining this road.
If they're asked later, then yeah, they could be asked to join later.
Or if they don't want.
I don't know.
I'm curious how that works.
I'm not an attorney. I don't know. That was addressed to some extent in the letter from McCallum. It was mentioned that they could be asked to join later. For that section.
I'm just curious, I already belong,
I'm sorry, Chip, I didn't hear
But
you.
they already belong to one association, the Manitoba Camp Association, so this could be double jeopardy for them.
No, we would never double bill anyone for, they don't want anyone.
No, that would never be.
There's no double jeopardy, people would not pay more than once.
Curious how it works.
We can have additional conversation about that and get into the
I have
discussion
another,
hearing. Jack?
is there a construction schedule? I looked in what you filed in July of 2024 in the tab 6. It doesn't really contain a construction schedule, and what I was concerned about was making sure that the infrastructure improvements were done before people started building houses there. And I noticed that in our standard conditions for subdivisions, which maybe you should take a look at, it says that all subdivision site improvements, including and conveyances and proposed easements must be completed prior to the issuance of any lot use or development permits. So I was wondering if, what is the construction schedule? What comes first and what's next?
I didn't catch all of that. The blower kicked on. I'll have to think through that. But I think your question is about the construction schedule
Yes, for
And-
site improvements.
for the improvements of the road, yes. The construction schedule has been submitted in the preliminary process, preliminary application and reviewed there. The intention is, as soon as we can get an approval, construction can start. We do have limitations at the stream process. So in-stream work, in the stream bed has to be a DEP scheduled timeline. But the road can be started. You lay down a temporary bridge, happens all the time this time of year. They lay down a temporary bridge, they can go in, they can continue work in the rest of the road. But the in-stream work can only be done during a certain time, and I believe it's July 15th, is that right, Darren? July 15th, they can't start before then, unless we can get DEP's approval to go start earlier, which can happen. You get a dry spring, you know, first July, end of June, there's no water flowing in this thing. You can take a picture, then DEP, and they'll say, yeah, go ahead. So it's not a hard date, but that's the general guideline, July 15th.
Well, aside from the road improvements, there are other improvements, right? Like the pond and the outlet and the weir.
I'm counting all of that.
Say that again?
Jack, you're talking about number 17, is that right?
Yes.
Number 7.
So that is one of the standard conditions specifically for subdivisions. And it states, unless otherwise approved by the planning board, all subdivision site improvements, including the conveyances of any proposed easements, must be completed prior to the issuance of any lot use or development.
Yep. That's relatively standard. I think the idea is that the applicant could start marketing the homes, it could even enter into purchase and sales, but they're not closing on any houses until the road's been built into that.
And the other improvements, stormwater management.
Yes, and when I say infrastructure, I mean all the infrastructure, stormwater, road, culverts, everything that's been on the plans that have been approved.
I also wanted to note for you that in Article 8, Section G, it has a regimen of inspections that the CEO is to be involved in during the subdivision development. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
We have no problems with that whatsoever. Thank you.
And I think the last question I have is, I didn't see in the covenants whose responsibility it was to maintain like the fire pond and the stormwater management features.
That's the road association.
The road, so if it doesn't say it, we will clarify, but the intent is that the road association is also responsible for everything that's shown on the plans, including the stormwater pond and the stormwater. In fact, we actually have on plan showing an easement on one of the lots where the pond is on. That easement's from that lot owner to the road association, so that the road association can maintain the ponds. So that has been the intent. I'm not sure that it clearly or doesn't clearly state that. But the road association. Can we?
It says it there here, it says the association shall be responsible for the maintenance and repair. The fire pond is delineated in the subdivision plan. First page of the road association bylaws. Paragraph 5.
There you go.
And paragraph 4 mentions maintaining the culverts. So the first page of the road association, I believe addresses that. Excuse me for talking in turn about.
No. Follow me.
Other questions? Anything else you want to highlight?
I don't think so. We're at the 11th hour, and thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for coming out on that night. This is ridiculous. That's it. I'm available for more questions though, as the meeting goes on, if you want to.
I also want to ask if there is anyone, in the Zoom space who has any factual question or procedural question, if you'd like to ask that now, that would be appropriate. Seeing none, I guess I would ask for a motion if everyone is ready and there are no further questions.
Could I ask another question?
Sure.
I think I overheard you say that the road association would be responsible for maintaining the improvements. But it looks like from our ordinance that it should be the homeowners association responsibility. I see the road association is different than the homeowners association.
Some projects do have a homeowners association. Some have a road association, some have both. Depends on the project and how the developer would like to set it up. This project isn't proposing a homeowners association, it's only proposing a road association. Which kind of is a homeowners association, it's just not concerning the lots, it's just concerning the infrastructure.
Well,
So that's,
you might want to just take a look at, it's Article 8, Section J. J is in Jack. It's on the bottom of page 91.
that's all, thank you.
So it seems to require a homeowners association with certain responsibilities.
This is Article 8, Section J.
Right,
It's,
page 91.
it's, Article 8, Section 17.
Oh, right, subject,
J.
Section 17 J.
right, sorry.
Between the lines 17 parking areas.
It's page 91.
Printed. Is not, it doesn't appear to match that on the lower use. Basic requirements for cluster development in mind, clusters.
It's before clusters.
Thank you. You mind? No, very much. I promise I'll return it. All right, don't worry, I'm sure I get it. Rules, homeowners associations.
Jack, are you aware of anything in the land use ordinance that refers specifically to road associations? And their responsibility is distinct from homeowners association?
I don't know.
No, and I just looked for a definition of homeowners association, and there isn't one, and my assumption is that. You know, a road association might, for all intents and purposes, be a form of homeowners.
Right, right. But I'm seriously, if there was something in the land use ordinance that specifically referenced road associations and gave them different responsibilities, then I'd be concerned. But it sounds like what the ordinance was attempting to do was make sure an association of involving homeowners would be responsible. And this is apparently, this plan does do that, just calls it a road association. So.
Yeah, I think that's true.
It's certainly the intent, sir. Thank you.
Well, could you just change the
I'm
name
not
of
an
it
expert,
to
and
a
there may be
homeowners
things else in the land use ordinance that I don't know. That put special responsibilities on road associations, but I'm not aware of it.
I would also point out that these, in the subdivision I live in, we call it a landowners association, because you may have people who don't build right away, but they're still sharing in the costs, so. Yeah, it's whatever you call it, but it's. As long as the people who own the property.
It's still an association meant to cover all the things that are in that section of the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? Other questions? Okay. We're ready for motion. Anyone has a motion? We're looking at completeness only on this final application.
Should it be complete or conditionally complete based upon the road inspection requirement from the board, the road commissioner? Did I hear that was a requirement that the road hasn't been reviewed by the road association? I mean, by the,
Yes, that needs to happen.
so can we mark it conditionally complete, subject to the review from the road? What is it, the road board? Road committee. All right, so I'll move that we find the application conditionally complete. Subject to review by the road committee.
And the other part of that be to notify butters, schedule a hearing. Usually those go together.
Okay, yeah, so let's amend the motion with those two additional requirements, is that all right? Okay.
Right.
And the road committee, I'm looking, they meet the second Thursday of every month, so I can't imagine that you'd be able to get on the agenda for this week, which I think would be this week. So you're gonna have to wait another month, unless you get to Eric, and he's the road commissioner. Is there a notification requirement, and this needs to go to the town for the agenda?
I don't know what it is for the road committee. I mean,
Yeah.
the planning board has very specific notice.
I think this has been going on for 2 years, hasn't it? Like the process for the subdivision approval. You keep dragging this thing out.
We talk to their hourly basis most days. We'll.
Okay, well, so you might be able to get to, yeah, I'm not, it's probably not our responsibility to advise on these things, but I'm looking at the website, it says the second Thursday of every month, so you might be able to do something this week. If they don't have notification requirements.
Okay, so we have a motion to find the application complete.
Second.
Okay, conditioned upon the road committee approval and also to schedule a public hearing and notify butters. We have a second from Henry. Further discussion? And Dana, you'll be a voting member
I
tonight.
hope so, I just made the motion.
Yes. Because, yeah, John will not be a voting member tonight, but Dana will be. Okay, all those in favor? Jack?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Again, especially today. And snow.
One of the special months of the day. You got used to coming up and everything.
Yeah, so the next regular meeting would be the
Next meeting on the second.
22nd, that's 2 days after Easter.
That'd be pretty hard to know.
We have the 21st off too for Patriots Day.
Oh, that's right.
You do? That would, I have to get all the notifications out tomorrow. Make it 2 weeks and I'm not.
Yeah, okay,
Oh, mercy.
all right, so we're probably looking at the first meeting in May.
Okay.
I don't have a calendar right in front of me.
And we probably need to road issue resolved for the public hearing. Well, actually, the way the ordinance reads. The approval, the review and approval by the road committee has to be preceding to our final approval. So we probably. We don't need. Okay, so you can start the public hearing. The May 13th.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so second Tuesday is May 13th, so tentatively, we can plan on that at this point.
Okay. And turns out, if you don't make the April meeting of the road committee, the second Thursday. The first, is it the first Thursday? Okay. So
It's the second, but it's on the eighth, yeah. so
It's on the
second
8th.
Thursday,
So that actually puts it before the,
right?
so.
Yeah, yeah, two different, yeah, okay. Okay,
Thank you all.
thank you very much.
Very, very much.
I did see some cars off the road on the way here, so.
Yeah, drive safe.
That's pretty slick out there.
Yeah.
Well, there was a car off.
A little weather vane.
Right, but whether you saw it,
They're okay.
we're on it. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Have a good night.
There's no one up 117
Really?
coming down the hill.
Great.
Who works?
It's like buzzing off.
That car was way off the road.
Accumulating quickly.
When's picking up, so you get a phone picture.
Not me, I'm leaving early going to work.
So, before we get into talking about the procedural documents, if we could just take care of the minutes quickly, I think I'd like to do that. So we have minutes from March 25th. And Dawn, I saw that you did you see Dawn's
Yes.
proposed change?
I didn't, but it depends on when we signed up.
Okay.
It was probably at 4:30 today.
Yeah, so I would miss it. I was packing up.
So, you might want to put that out again for everybody.
Yeah, it was just, it's part of my motion. Added a condition.
Oh, okay.
Now,
To approve the minor revision application.
to approve, yeah, but rather than saying, I think you had written erosions.
I put additional condition that is still fence erosion berm be included.
Yeah, had silt fence, and I want to strike silt fence and put erosion control mulch or.
Erosion control. Erosion control
Firm.
mulch. Berm, and is berm? That was question, BERM or BU? Okay.
And I had, two little things, Angelica, let's see, it's the, third paragraph, public meeting, third paragraph that begins with Joe reviewed.
Yeah.
This, in the second line, it says there was one corner of the original foundation within the 50-foot setback. And we had talked about, it's been quite a while, but we had talked about this 50-foot issue when the application was in front of us. And it's not really, it's not a setback requirement. Its only significance is in determining the floor area and what counts as a floor area. When somebody's building it, it was complicated.
Yeah.
But I think that it would be more accurate if it said within 50 feet of the normal high water line of Torsi Pond, rather than say setback. And then, it references it again,
The second one, next paragraph, second line.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe proposed, move back behind the setback even further. And it could say, further back from the normal high water line. And take the setback piece out. Anything else, anyone?
I had a couple, but I covered two of them. Up above, Angelica, under public meeting, Paula explained the process. It need to be looked at as a new application or as a minor modification to an approved plan. That's the term used in the ordinance. That's why I'm
Perfect.
being picky.
Yeah.
Then I would, only other thing now, second to last paragraph on that first page. Second line. Or in the first line, after the comma, the board agreed that the application, I would say, should be treated as a minor modification to the original plan, rather than a new application. I would think that would be clear.
Yeah.
And then under that, motion by Henry to address the fiscal application as a minor modification, I say not revision, because that's again what the ordinance, term the ordinance uses.
Yeah.
And those are, and then on the top of the next page, last one. Motion by Don to approve the,
Minor modification.
well, I would just say there, because we already got through that. Motion by Don to approve the revised application. That's what I would say there.
Perfect.
Anything else? Any other changes? Not, I'm looking for a motion.
Move we accept the March 25th minutes as amended.
Second,
Motion second, discussion. All those in favor? Jack?
I abstain. I wasn't there.
No. Okay. And I did want to mention just quickly that, I did make the additional changes to the telecommunications ordinance that we talked about last time. Angelica and I worked together to kind of clean up that final draft, made some final adjustments, and I think it looks okay.
Adjustments to the adjustment.
Yeah. And it has been sent to Eric, who will be forwarding it to the select board if he hasn't already.
Yeah.
So thank everyone for all the work on that. It was turned into more of a major undertaking than I had expected it to, but hopefully it's finished and on its way. So,
Another 5 years.
well, no, till next year. So I had sent around a number of procedural documents, which are really still draft at this point. And tonight, I thought it would be a good opportunity just to have an initial conversation about those, what they were intended to do, what works for everyone, what doesn't. Any further issues that need to be addressed, and I expect that there are some additional things that we could do, but these documents came from a discussion that we started having probably a year and a half ago at this point, at least. Angelica, Eric, Jack, Chip, and I talked a number of times about putting some of these procedural issues more formally into written format. So that, both applicants and we would be able to refer to those and have something in writing that specifically outlined the process and elaborated on it a bit so it's clear. So this really was the first round of documents that came from that effort. Eric had written a memo in which he primarily, he laid out the process. Most of it came directly from the ordinance, the requirements. He did add some additional language for clarity in that memo. But the memo in and of itself was not intended to be a procedural guide. It really outlines, I think, a number of the issues that should be more specifically outlined in a more formal procedural document. But his memo was intended to get that ball rolling, and actually Jack and I had met with him and Angelica a couple of times and talked about the content of that memo. And also the flow chart that Angelica had put together, and a couple of the other documents. So, there are a few things here that, need some additional tweaks. I think each time I read it, I see something that I think, perhaps we could.
Sorry, like I left my easel.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
I thought you needed to push us out of snow there.
That's it, everything's what's wrong.
Sorry about that, guys.
It's okay. So the pieces, first there is Eric's memo that kind of, outlines the broad process and some of the issues that we talked about that were difficult about the process. And so part of his memo really focuses on the fact that, some of the issues that we've seen, problems that arise as problems, stem from the fact that applicants are not providing complete applications, or the timing is off, or they need additional information. So the focus really is on trying to identify those things that we could provide some clarity around that would smooth the process out and make it more efficient. Like I said, there is a flow chart that Angelica put together, and it's a busy little page, but it's, it's reflective. It's reflective of the process, and I think there are probably a few tweaks that could be made, but I think basically it's it's a good picture of the process and how that moves forward. There is a naming reference sheet here. Now this, as I understand it, Angelica, that has been implemented, and you and Chip are using that?
Not really, no.
No?
I would like to, as far as the agenda items go specifically, I've been using them, but not like for everybody because we hadn't gotten this far. So like I have like where I store them, I do number the agenda item numbers for, I think I started 6 months ago, maybe, right around town meeting. So anything from then would have an agenda item number. The reason that's so important is because if, like with select board, for instance, when we do an agenda, everything is numbered. And so once we do that meeting, I go in and I put in the spreadsheet what that number meant. So whatever it was for, if it was an appointment for an applicant, whatever. And then if that was voted on, or if it was just discussed. And I think that that's helpful, especially planning board, because a lot of the time, the hard part is finding all of the documents, all the application materials that we used for one particular applicant. Because our website allows us to go by dates and meetings versus actual applications. So this will make it a lot quicker and easier, I think, for Chip and I to find stuff, like I remember with the big white barn thing, we had to go back and look, this would make it way easier for us to just say, okay, it's right here. And that's something that, you know, whoever is working on the agenda would apply.
Who will actually assign the number?
I mean, that's kind of, you guys do the agenda, so I can stay out of it, or I can give you what numbers I've been using, and it's really just in my own folder for me to be able to quickly refer back. So I can share that with you guys if you want, and we'll just go from wherever we left off, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and we do it by fiscal year for select board, and I think that's pretty smart, so, you know, we'll start at number 1, you know, this, right now we're in 25. So it'll be 25-1 or whatever. But that's what, I think it's really helpful. The rest of it really probably pertains just to Chip and I, in my opinion, as far as the naming stuff goes.
So Angelica, when meeting minutes cover more than one item, what do you do?
So each item on those, on the agenda. If I'm understanding your question, each item on the agenda would be numbered separately, so even like my minutes would have a number, so it would be. The layout would have more of like a. I would, for planning board, I would start actually with like your communications as far as you guys and the staff and stuff, and then you would go into the old business for planning board, because we always start with the older applicants, almost always. And then we go into new business, but each thing, so if we had a public meeting about Manitoba, that would have a number. And then if we went and had a second meeting with Fisk, that would have its own number. And then you go to my minutes, that would have its own number, and so on and so forth. So if we have, like, this discussion right here could have been an agenda item number. So,
And you keep paper copies of everything?
yeah, we have paper copies.
But the
It's all,
minutes,
yeah,
aren't-
like,
the
oh,
minutes aren't in those files though, right?
the minutes, those are separate from like the planning board files or from the map lot files. The minutes go into a separate book for planning board specific retention.
In my experience trying to do that, it was difficult to go from the map lot number file to try to find minutes.
Yeah, and you won't, because it's in a totally different books, like setup thing, like it's completely different than what we have in map lot, so. With the agenda item numbering, then we can say, okay, well, we want the minutes from whatever, or the minutes that talk about this or that, then we can look that up by the agenda item, and I can go right into the minutes and pull them out. It's much easier to find things.
Could you explain to me the number that you assigned to the agenda today? The
Yep,
24-006.
yep, so that's one of those ones that I've been using.
Okay,
So like if you look at my planning board files for my stuff, my secretary stuff, everything Manitoba, even like their application materials you send me, it's all listed under that number.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it doesn't change no matter how long it takes.
exactly,
It's the
yeah,
same number for.
it's always the same number, so it's just a quick, easy reference, we don't have to be like, okay, well, let's, you know, we're gonna look through 600 meetings over the past, you know, however long. We can literally just go to that number and pull,
Makes sense to me, sounds
Everything.
good.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
yeah, it's very efficient.
I did have a conversation at one point, Angelica, with Eric about the, I know there's like this standard, meeting template somewhere on the website for town meetings. And it includes like old and new business, and for the work that the planning board does, I find that kind of a confusing concept. And so I had mentioned to Eric that I would prefer not to use that approach.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because we, I mean, sometimes, for instance, we might have an older application and a newer application. But there are reasons for doing one before the other, or, you know, the order of things might be different for a host of different reasons. So I had kind of pushed away from that. I know that shows up on the select board agenda, but, it never really worked.
Yeah,
in
and
my
we can
mind.
take that out too, we don't have to do that, really, the big thing is just the agenda item.
Yeah. There is a piece here, the site plan application completeness review. Eric had done this.
I can't hand out copies, I actually did this for this meeting, and I found weaknesses, so. Everybody like to see it,
Sure.
comment, whatever.
So I guess my general question on this is, does everyone find this, I mean, obviously, Chip needs to do the initial completeness review, and it's important work that he does. We need to have the result of that review. And the question, I guess, is this form useful to us? And what's your view of this form, Chip?
It's. I can see the first page. But remember, and you've learned it, and I've learned the pain. No matter how much I dig into these applications, there's a lot that I don't catch and you guys catch, and I think that's part of the whole series of how we work through this. So, I mean, I can mark the yeses, but we're gonna run into, it's not there. There's a few that didn't work out for me also. If you look at number 2 at the top, what are the key considerations of this application to be noted in the planning board? Yes or no? Huh? Excuse me?
Now, I think that's what the box is for, but.
Okay, yeah, anyways, so I mean. Somebody's give me some tutelage on what you'd want in the box. This is how I would have answered it. In a panic when I thought that we were really doing this tonight. And again, some of the questions down there too will be deferred to and not applicable. Estimated value of the project presented on the application, appear to be correct. Well, the subdivision wasn't really a
Yeah.
fiscal number. So I mean, I'm willing to do this. I can see the value in having a sheet that, lays out the date of the application, map and lot. Date submitted to me, so you have, where the starting point was. But, and then on the bottom. Completeness, that's when I decided. Deadline, to me, I think that's important, so we know what they are. But I'm not sure the value in answering some of these questions, and especially the ones on the back.
When I read Eric's memo from last fall, and then also looking at this, I think completeness is probably the #1 issue that we have, and we have tons of reviews after reviews after reviews, and still it feels like we're doing discovery sometimes when they come to these meetings. Like, we just have an example. I mean, how did we miss that they needed to have a road commissioner review? I mean, there's no way that you can possibly know everything, especially when you're doing one subdivision every 3 years. And then, just as being a participant and a witness in this board for the last 9 months, it feels like sometimes we're subjecting people to additional requirements while they're in the meeting. And I'll use the example of the wood lot up on 17, when we asked him for a map. And then he came in with a map and presented it to us and said, well, we want dimensions on it. And it sort of felt for a minute we were gonna reject it until he left and came back with the dimensions on the map and then resubmitted the map. And that's weeks that go between meetings for individuals who are busy and have invested their time in these businesses and things like that. So I don't know what we can do. And these are things that need to be caught. But how do we do it in a way that's not putting these people through more meetings or delaying them by weeks and months?
I get the sense that that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
This checklist is so that we go through that stuff up front. When I was looking down through it, I was thinking, yeah, this would be really helpful, although my biggest bugaboo has to do with site plans, and I went back to the LUO because it doesn't say anything about the site plan being drawn to scale. But I don't know about the rest of you, but if we get a site plan that's not drawn to scale, it does say that they have to have all the distances and dimensions labeled. So that should probably be in the checklist as well. Right now, it references site plans illustrating the following, and then it goes down through the things that follow, but there is that one provision about if not to scale, then including all those dimensions. And
Well, it feels like there needs to be a deeper checklist underneath this checklist, because it says,
Well-
does the land use, does it appear to be correct? Yeah, it appears to be correct. Until another set of eyes get on it, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
it's still not correct.
And,
This
you
is
know,
gonna be the
bear in
nature of the
mind,
beast. It's gonna be the nature of the beast, because we can dig deep into, you know, when we're talking about mapping. Then we can dig deep into, you know, floodplain, and then we can dig deep into, you know, what's a wetland and what's not a wetland. Everyone's unique. So there is gonna be this deep, this digging and this finding other things.
and I mean, this particular checklist too is specific to Chip's initial look at an application. So when it comes in, you know, do the pieces appear to be there? I mean, that's what he's supposed to be doing. And it's not intended to uncover every issue that might be uncovered during the planning board's review of it, because that would be different. And
But
in
I
more
think to
detail.
Dana's point, we want the applicant to know as much of that stuff as early as
Yeah,
possible.
oh, absolutely.
Because the longer time goes on,
Yeah.
the more difficult.
I mean, these requirements are all documented somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in the application.
I
I
agree with
mean,
you.
it's pretty scientific.
Yeah,
How do we,
I agree with you. It almost like you need the. You need to, for example, let's take the subdivision application we're working on right now. If, you know, while it's fresh on our mind and we're done with it. We should probably create like a little bit of flow chart or something, or some kind of step process, so the next applicant has the benefit of more of a summary format. And at least, because for example, where that road statement was that Jack found, I mean, very applicable, right?
Yeah.
But not in the same section in any way, wasn't connected to that review process, and so I think that, you know, our ordinance isn't user friendly.
yeah,
So it's more about trying to make sure that these applications for, when we have a solar application, you know, it's pretty. They know where to look, and so I think each kind of application, you know, if it's a home remodel or it's a new house in the shoreline district, and, you know, I think there's some general. Bullet points that can be made, and if we commit to that. Process of reading like a summary sheet, guide sheet after each one of these over the next few years, you'll have a nice little collection of these documents. That would be very helpful to applicants, I would argue. It's one.
yeah, or there's some technology where they can go online and fill out the application and like a configurator to ask them all the questions.
We wait 6 months, we could put it into AI and just ask them to. Come up with
But I mean, I think during the application process for the subdivision, we started asking questions about a salamander report. Like, and I mean, it was pretty clear in the land use ordinance and the EPA. What was required, and we started to dig into that, which I mean, we can certainly ask questions about it. But we started to question the validity of the report after the person. I don't know how much they spent on this entire thing. I mean, it had to be $100,000, I would imagine.
You know, part of that, the function of the opponents. We will do process rights too, whatever we think some of the arguments, we have to have the right to articulate them and we have to consider them. So, yeah, I think that was one of the issues, the timing of the salamander report that was raised by the opponents.
Yeah, I mean, was it raised by us, by the opponent? Oh, it was by the, okay, well, okay. I get that.
But
Yeah.
I thought it was-
I thought it was.
I think your point is, Dave.
Yeah,
again, you bring in a good point. I mean, we have to listen to the public. We have to listen to what they come back with, and then it covers a lot of things. A completeness in my mind is I go back, you know, when I give these people these applications, I said, you gotta know every one of these things that are laid out. I suggest you write it out, but if not, you gotta be ready to answer the questions. So if I do something like this, I'm gonna go to their application and there's something in there. They've completed that. I'm not gonna say if it's full, it's right or it's wrong, that's your job. But that's where all the minutia comes in that holds things up.
And then depending on public comment,
Yeah,
it can go in a different
well, they
direction.
can send you sideways for sure.
So
So
that's the challenge.
I know, it's not a criticism, I just feel like there's all this. The land use ordinance is incredibly well documented, all that, there's massive amounts of information in there, but we can't seem to raise it up. To a level where it's intelligible to the person who needs to go through the process, so they can't possibly miss anything coming into a meeting, it feels like they could potentially miss something. And my primary worry about that is the cost of going through the process. We've got 2 years of a subdivision, there's 9 lots that have been sitting there. And by the time they've done this process, those are gonna be $650,000-$750,000 homes in Readfield, when we're talking about the high cost of housing, it's unaffordable for people to come here. And we probably, not us as board, we probably just added $150,000 worth of cost to those houses and having them apply to this process.
And that's the way it is. I mean,
Does
if
it
you
take
look
2
at,
years to
yes,
make
it
this
is,
subdivision?
because.
This did not take 2 years, importantly, that keeps getting thrown
If you
around.
look at the subdivisions here,
Somewhere.
they create them, they get them approved. Most of them sit there and go through 2 or 3 owners before they actually get built or built.
We have other things.
I mean, it's the nature of the beast.
It's there.
I mean, we can't, I don't know, maybe I'm too idealistic, but to think that we were concerned about the cost of housing and the lack of housing. It takes a year.
There's another subdivision that we, I can't remember what it's called, but we approved it years ago, and it's still
It's Scrivener Hill.
Scrivener Hill, right? It's got like,
And now they're putting modulars in it.
There were a lot,
I
a
mean, it's
lot
sat
of
vacant
lots in
for
there.
years
Yeah,
after it was approved, so there was no rush.
Well, the other one over here too, at the top of Kent's Hill, it's the one over there, Lovejoy Estates. That's sat idle for 5 or 6 years or more.
I think one of the things that comes to mind for me, Dana, when I hear, your comment, I agree that the way the land use ordinance is set up, there is, if you use the example of subdivisions, there are things that apply to subdivisions in a lot of different locations.
yeah.
And if there was a section about subdivisions, and it said, you've got to do, the site criteria in section blah, blah, blah. You're also subject to the performance standards on page 91. Also see page 103 because there's something else. I mean, that kind of a map, a guide, I think might be useful in the ordinance itself. I mean, it would take some work, but,
Well, I think you have discretionary budget for legal assistance, is that right? I mean, for the planning board.
yes, there is some money for planning board.
So is
It's
there-
not a huge amount.
Is there discretionary budget we could hire a firm to help us come up with these checklists? Because I mean, Chip is busy, like he's got a day job, he's gonna be out there with people. How do we create something?
Yeah. I mean, it's possible to hire, someone to do a we did the contract for the affordable housing piece.
Yeah,
That money came from a different source, but it is possible to, to do that sort of thing.
and I mean, AI is really not a joke. I mean, if we could figure out how to make that work, that would be even better. I don't think we're gonna be on the cutting edge of technology or anything.
Well, we can use it. I mean, all this is public information.
I've used it, I've had it in truck to land, so it's many times, but it's still business stuff. Okay,
It might be good though, procedural lists and things like that. It's usually pretty good at figuring out like, what goes with what.
I mean, I guess my recommendation on that whole tirade is just a really detailed list of what it means to be complete and correct. For any of the scenarios that we have out there, and I think this checklist says, is it correct, is it complete? And then we get into here, and like, it's not, like, it says on the checklist it is, but it's not, because we found something else.
Yeah, but it's two different purposes. I mean, what you're talking about is a more detailed thing that that clearly outlines every requirement that's applicable. This doesn't do that. And this,
No.
you know, this is not intended to do that. So it's really two separate pieces. You know, this gets the application through the door, but it doesn't do that entire review that you're talking.
My feeling is nothing should get to this board unless it's 100% complete and accurate. And it's been verified to be that way, because if the information is sitting out there somewhere, it can be checked. This shouldn't be the requirement of, we should be here to double check. But not check.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the function of the planning board, is to do the checking. I mean, you know, the completeness review, make sure the pieces are there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't address whether or not they are, you know, the answers that have been provided are correct or not necessarily.
I mean, the example you said, we missed a road review, that's a material miss. Prior to it coming to us for a check on completeness. That's not a small one.
Let me just make one point for you, Dana.
Yeah.
Because not everybody, like you, or like these guys, or some of these bigger ones that we do. Most of our applications are people that don't have a lot of money. That want to get things through, whether it's their business. Or, you know, selling a lot, or, you know, building something where they don't have a lot of money to do. Okay, these people are experts in this field, and they can't hire lawyers and everything else.
I know.
So we can't make it more detailed and demanding for these people, because they're gonna miss out. You're gonna, you know, you're really gonna make it their life tougher. So I think we've got to be flexible in terms of the magnitude of the application and the type of person that's submitting it.
I don't mean, it implies that you think I should be held to a different standard because you're implying that I have money and they don't.
I think all of us,
Is that what I'm?
all of us are different than 90, not 90, I'd say at
So
least
I mean,
50%.
I mean, really, it comes across like there's two different standards. There's people who perceive to have money and then there's people who don't have money.
Forget the money. Forget the money.
Yeah.
Let's say the savvy or the, I don't want to say intelligence either. I want to say that have the wherewithal, that these guys are able to hire lawyers. They're able to hire engineers. They're able to hire marketing people, okay? They do have to be held to a different standard, okay?
What are you, really?
Yes, I believe
No,
that.
absolutely not. I mean, what I'm saying is that we should be assisting everybody to go through the process, and it shouldn't be based upon your income or your ability to hire a lawyer to go against the planning board in the town. It needs to be applied fairly, regardless of income and ability.
Mhm.
And what I'm really concerned about is the people who can't afford the lawyers, who can't afford the architects, that have to go through this process and need to be able to do it on their own
Right?
and not get, surprised because they miss something.
This opens the door, okay? You can make this more difficult, the door's gonna be
I'm
more.
not trying to make it more difficult. I'm trying to make it easier for them to comply with the process.
I don't think there's a double standard. I've never seen evidence of that. I think that the conversations are different. If you have a sophisticated versus an unsophisticated applicant, and that's the way the world works.
Yeah.
I mean, but I don't think the standard is different. I
It
think
can't
how
be. That
you
would
get
be illegal.
there, how you get there, and how it looks might be a little bit different. But the standard, in my view, is not different. It cannot be different. It has to be the same.
I agree, and I don't believe it is, honestly. I think that everyone's going to be the same standard. I can see it.
Yeah. This is a good step.
Yeah, definitely. We know the process. Good stuff right here, too.
So, I think, there seems to be a good sense that, that there might be something that we could do to pull this together in more detail going forward, which I think is a good way to go. I think that maybe there are things that we could do in the ordinance itself. One example that comes to mind is what I just mentioned about the subdivision thing, We could have a section that says, okay, subdivisions, this is what you're required to comply with. These are the standards that pertain. And there might be other opportunities to do that with other kinds of projects as well.
You almost need like one of these. Check sheet for subdivisions, one for water frontage. Right? Well. Yeah. Because there's such different animals. Subdivision versus the use type of dealership. You almost need a different check sheet.
Versus wood processing versus auto shop versus,
Well, you could have a,
CID versus,
yeah,
Yeah, and I really would, encourage you to think about it as two separate checklists too, because this one, like I said, is just the broad brush. That gets it through the door, the pieces are there, basically. It doesn't go through every detailed requirement. And I think that's where, the shoreland project or the subdivision, that's where you could draw those distinctions.
I mean, we can hit the big ones first, right? I mean, like, there's probably ones in, I don't. I haven't looked at the applicants, but what's the most common one? Is it lakefront? Is it building a new house? Probably not subdivisions, it's probably.
becoming ADUs.
ADUs,
Yeah.
you wanna put an ADU like here, hey, you wanna put an ADU on your property, here's what you need to know.
Yeah, but we don't do those. ADUs,
Well, for,
you do.
I do.
Yes.
We're all
We're
the
not
same,
talking
we're all
about
the
you.
same
We're
family
talking
here.
about
Come on.
planning board.
no, but it's a good point, like, there's lots of questions about it.
Yeah, so I think probably, I don't know, the thing that comes to my mind that we've seen most commonly is, these projects like this project. Doing various renovations to non-conforming structures on the lake. I mean, that's a big one.
that's pretty common.
So anyway, this was intended kind of as an initial conversation about this, so if you wanna think about it a bit, and we can talk about it at a future meeting. We might have some more suggestions, we can talk about specific ways to approach it. If we want to, to do a piece. To start with, it could be kind of a test project, pick a topic and do it that way.
We just kind of run one through as a fake one, like, hey, non-conforming lakefront property, I want to expand it.
Yeah.
And then we just troubleshoot it here and ask questions and come up with a checklist.
And the one other thought I had, I wanted to throw out, see, you can think about it and decide if it has merit, but I had started actually about a year ago to do an FAQ sheet on the land use process generally. And I have a whole list of questions. I didn't finish doing the responses to them, but I think that, in my mind, it was something that probably addresses one of your concerns, Dana, about applicants, being able to understand at the very beginning, what does this process looks like? How long is it gonna take?
Yeah.
What do I have to do? What can I expect? That sort of thing. And so I'm thinking that, even if we did something like what we just talked about, an FAQ might be helpful as well.
Yeah, like starting with the high level process, if you're thinking about making a renovation.
Right,
Right. Here's what you need.
Right.
When you don't have a conversation.
I think also that was, I was just thinking when you said that, I think eventually maybe trying to come up with sort of a chart that has, you have, what's the approximate time frame for this kind of thing? I mean, it varies, of course,
Yeah,
but you could at least give every kind of, because some of them are just one meeting. And then some of them are gonna be 3 meetings.
Frames on your flow
Yeah,
chart.
a subdivision may be like,
Yeah,
a subdivision may be a year or two, right? So it.
we
it's
do
generally
within 30 days. I think
Concept.
would be expected.
Yeah, there's some, yeah.
Cause you know, if you don't know, and you come here and you're like, wow, it's gonna take me a year and a half to get my solar thing approved. Yeah. I mean, it seems normal to people who've been through it,
Yeah,
but if you haven't been through it, or you're in the public and you haven't seen that before, it can be a little confusing and frustrating as to why certain things can take longer than others, and I think to your point, that's important to disclose, and I think it's fair. I think we should improve to do faster and more efficiency whenever we can, but at the end of the day, there is just the inherent public process things. I have two unrelated things to bring up, very minor things.
anything else on this? So everybody, give it some thought and
That's
we'll
great.
talk about it again and, figure out what we want to do to start and move forward with something. Okay, before you go, Chip you said you had something.
Yeah, you made a comment that kind of tweaked something. Yeah, I'm a big part of planning. It's a lot that you guys don't see, because I try to make things easier and get them through, because they don't necessarily touch on you. A couple of times we disagreed, but turns out they have been complicated. That being said, I'm kind of in a conundrum right now. I've been pushed a lot over the last 2 years to follow up on violations of RVs, people living in them without a septic, without, supposed to. I have one where a guy just plowed into his property, plowed in an RV and a porta potty, has been living there for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's just one example, but there's more and more coming up. And the courts aren't being friendly, state's not being friendly, so it's important that we have some kind of control, homegrown control here. What I'd like to do is, code officers have a online blog, and this week there was probably about 10 letters in there on just this issue. I just got hit with one here that after all this work and everything, we went to court, he didn't show up, and so the judge made a default judgment, which now the lawyer's saying, well, we'll let him go if he just gets his stuff off the property, and that's kind of like tough for me. But there's a lot of this going on. There is a problem with housing, there is a problem with, affordability and everything. And we have probably 5 or 6 of these in this town that people have asked me to clean up or, deal with. But I'm finding more and more that RVs are being allowed when it comes to the courts, when it comes to the state, as long as they have a septic system. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's what our regulations say. But I'd like to share those documents with you, and then what I'll call RFC, refer for comment. And if you don't think it's important, that's fine. If you can find something in your mind that, tweaks you, that says, well, it's already in our ordinance or whatever, anything you can do to help me out. Because I find it very difficult to work these things for 2 or 3 years to get to the point where don't worry about it. A lot of them clean it up, a lot of them get it done. They're worried about a notice of violation. They're worried about a threat of $50,000 of accruing fines. But there are those that don't. And are we willing just to let that go? Or might we put something in our ordinance that makes it more concrete? I don't know, but I'd like to share those with you. They're not hard to read, but you might see what I'm trying to get at. And I'd appreciate your comments back if you could help.
I'll put you in a tough spot too. I mean, it's a terrible situation where somebody has to live like that, and then you have to deal with it, so.
Well, Chip, when you have an RV like an RV that's clearly not in compliance.
Right,
With our land use ordinance,
right.
and we need an enforcement action, do you go to the select board to get the town attorney involved, or how does that?
I go to the select board to ask that I can involve the town attorney, but this is after sometimes a year of going back and forth.
And
NOVs,
if the select board thinks it's not worth the effort,
they never did that.
then they don't, so they just back you up.
Yeah.
It's the town attorney who think sometimes doesn't want to push it all the way, what's going on?
Town attorneys sometimes have different opinions than we do.
Yeah, but this last one, Chip, what she said was hard to understand,
Yeah.
but I didn't think it was a problem. I mean, it was.
Which one are we talking about?
This is when she wrote it, we were talking about, recreational vehicle and mobile home.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
forth. But what it boils down to is that what she was saying was the way the ordinance is written, yeah, they can live in an RV, but they have to have a septic system and they have to meet the setbacks, you know, the dimensional requirements. And so
Yeah,
I thought that the problem that you were having was, I mean, the big problem is the septic system.
I think it's an overall problem because it's clearly laid out in the state that an RV is not a, you know, a place for habitation. It's a recreational thing that's seasonal and it lays out certain dates and everything. That's what I used to, now I'm like, I'm in a conundrum and I'm finding out many of my fellow code officers are having problems because there is a problem with affordability. And yes, it's a terrible situation to be in, but there's also a lot of people that just don't want to pay rent. They've been offered places to move and get out. But if they can have an RV and scratch by with going in a bag and throwing the bag away, it happens. It's here.
But, I mean, right now, we don't know what some other towns do, whether some other towns have different ordinances, but our ordinance is pretty clear, isn't it?
It's clear, but it doesn't seem to be enforced.
But if there's not a desire to enforce it on the part of the town, on the part of the town attorney, I'd ask the attorney, are we supposed to redraft our ordinance to make it work?
I think there's certain things that have been suggested in some of these letters, and I'd love again to get your comments. That with just by saying, you know, one line or something, it could clear up some of these things. Can't come out right now with one of the examples, but I do think there's certain things that we could tighten up, and yes, these things are not gonna come to you. Come to me, but you guys write the rules. So I'm just reaching out to say, help me out, look at this. We've got, 5 or 10 others in the state that are saying pretty much what I'm running into in here and in Wayne. I'd love your help in just looking at it and saying, hey, that was a good idea or whatever. So I'll send you the documents and just, if you think of something, fine, if you don't, that's fine too, but I'm just reaching out for some help.
Have any of your ADU issues gone to the appeals board? Have they reached that stage?
Yeah, most of them are very clear, people are willing to do it within the balance of, the ordinances that we've laid out and state and everything. Mother-in-law apartments and everything else are now ADUs, and it's more. They're allowed just about anywhere now. I haven't had a problem with that. Problem I'm having with is the poverty or the mental awareness, acuity. Okay, there's some people, we have a couple of them that like living in squalor, like living without heat, like living with, this kind of thing. And we don't like it. It's uncomfortable for us. But you're talking to me about holding everybody to the same standard. That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. Because I don't want to throw anybody out. I don't want to take away, what they're comfortable with and everything. But then I have the next person that comes along and says, well, what about that camp down on that pond? How come you allow that? Okay, so. And I think this is kind of what I was getting to do with you. I didn't word it right, okay?
Yeah,
But you gotta be open to working with these things, being flexible. And not getting frustrated like I do sometimes, that you've
No,
worked
you're
it so hard, you get to a court, you get to a lawyer and. It's gonna go nowhere, and you're like, what have we been doing? And that's when I get the problem with the next person. That's a lot there, I'll come down where I am. So, and I can live with that, I can deal with it. But if there's anything we can do to make it a little bit easier in our ordinance. That will hold up. So that would be helpful.
The courts won't back you.
Not
The way it is right now.
No, they will not.
Water's right.
Yeah,
That's,
I had two
it's
last
getting to
week,
be a real problem for you.
where neither one of them showed up and. Pretty much, I see them both. Making it another year or two, hopefully go away.
Well, if you've got stuff, Chip, send it around.
I will, thank you.
Henry,
I had one very minor thing and one thing for Chip maybe to ask you a question. The minor thing was I actually just looked at the bylaws for this board, which was something I haven't done in years, but I took a look at them. And it says that you, chair. Shall call a meeting at least every month. Have a meeting every month. And I just didn't know if that was correct, or if you. You should take a look at that. It says we will have a meeting every. Let's go. Look at also has articles. It references state regulation. I'm pretty sure it's outdated.
It may be,
So,
the bylaws are old. I've looked at them recently
I just didn't
as
know
well.
if
They
they
need
needed
some
updating.
updating.
But I didn't know if there was time between now and the town meeting, quick, because it's very short, there are like 2 days.
Yeah,
Front
yeah,
half
it's
of
not-
the space, it's not exactly one. If we could squeeze it in, but if not, we should put it on there, so next year they get updated. Just-
I am not. Know the answer to this. I don't know that the bylaws have to go to town meeting.
They do,
I don't think so.
great.
I think it's
Yeah.
much simpler than that.
Yeah, the question is whether we can change them ourselves or whether the select board has to
Right.
approve the change.
Right.
Well, the last time they went to town meeting. Bylaws, well, they were incorporated articles and whatever.
Well, I think it might have been in the context of the, there was some point in time when the planning board was formally established
Yes,
under statute.
1974 or something.
I don't know what the date was.
the
But
one
the
that.
bylaws may have, the original bylaws may have come about.
Oh, they could have been. Who knows? You're probably right, I just thought it would be good.
I remember reading one in town, Readfield statute planning board in 1974 or something, it was something like that.
Yeah, these ones are from the late 80s. My second question was about the Norwich solar project.
Yeah.
So. I only look because I drive past there every single day. I was just wondering. I took a look at their application and their approved plot. And I would say. They're not in compliance with what they said they would build. So I'm just curious to see what you thought.
I've been up there a couple times. We have had meetings as they move
I
along.
mean, maybe you.
I think that what is out of whack a bit is the road in.
Well, the road, I would say the road in, what they've cut, which is a lot more. And the poles. The application that was approved only approved 3 poles up by the road. And there's a whole lot of poles that go way back into the woods that go back into the development. So
There were other poles approved. There is a certain run that's underground. They've run into a lot of shale rock, bedrock and things like that. That's why the road is wider than it was. CMP came in and placed poles without working with them. I'll go back and check, but I do believe that putting it inside the building area, which hasn't been built yet.
the plot clear, I think that the plot clearly approved. We had this whole discussion when we had this application, we talked about it for a long time. It was absolutely underground utility, until it hit the road. There was no above ground, major utility line. There was
way there.
So that again.
They knew
They
the light
talked
was
about
there
it.
before they even started.
They knew that long time ago, right? And so now you go by there, it's all above ground. There is a section of it that's underground. But by the road is a much larger area that's above ground that's in the plot. And also there are a bunch of poles that are up in the woods. That were not approved. They're not on the plot, and they're not on the plan. That was supposed to.
I'll go back and look at it. I'll give them
That was
all.
supposed to be all underground. I would agree with you about the road. That's why I was asking, because it was supposed to be linked. But I thought, well, maybe it's just during construction, the road's kind of wider, kind of a hot mess. We have experience with hot mess solar roads, we do with that. But perhaps the finished product was a little. But they did cut more of the trees than I thought. We had a long discussion on that.
We did, that crossed my mind as I was going, I look up there and think, there's not much left for trees.
No, they cut way more back than we had approved. And I'm just saying, if it was one thing, I wouldn't even bring it up in this meeting.
Yeah.
But I've cited at least 3, if not 4 things that are not in compliance with what we approved on the planning board. So they probably need to come back to the planning board. or they need to explain to you what they're doing. There's, I know I'm trying to be accused of, there's probably really good reasons what they're doing, right?
Yeah, no, that is, get them in here if we need to.
But, you know, they need to reconcile their development.
Do you remember, Henry, what the buffer was on that line?
I have to look, yeah, we had a specific measurement, so we
Yeah.
can go back. I remember Jack talked about it quite a bit. And I remember they wanted to push it further down because of the way over down or something like that. It was like this push and pull, you know, we said you should do more this way, and they said, no, we want more this way.
Yeah, I thought that was side to side though, not back
Maybe
to
you're right.
front.
Maybe
I think
you're
it
right.
was this way.
But I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about the front.
Yeah.
I will talk to him. And if I can, I'll get them in to answer your questions.
We're just, you could just have a conversation with them to start, we don't wanna like, I'm not trying to like. Help them in the project by any means, I just wanted to understand what they were doing.
Got it.
A couple of people asked me about it, so I heard.
Are you overly careful? Like, I've been trying to hold my breath on this one, but. Is there anything in the ordinance that prevents a business from painting itself with chalkboard paint?
That will be gone in 30 days.
We had that conversation.
I'm like, do we need to put that in the ordinance or?
We're allowed to have special things for the first 30 days of opening the business.
Okay.
They can have banners, they can have everything else. I don't think there is, but he's very frank, he's been very helpful, very compliant, and when I mentioned that, I said, I kind of made a decision myself, and I said, it's not allowed. And I said, it'll have to be gone in 30 days, and he's agreed to that, so.
We're not allowed to say the character of the town, but it's a little uncharacteristic. How about graffiti building in the middle of town?
I was told I was an old fart. This is the way that they do business nowadays, so.
Yeah, it's so attractive.
But that's been addressed, and it will be painted over.
Okay.
So our other businesses gone.
The other business is gone, that's an empty store.
Oh, the one downtown,
What's that?
it's gone.
Yeah.
Cannabis.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was being supported by the late great
Yes,
Bob, and
yes.
anyways.
So does that mean there's an opportunity for a new one to come in town if they choose to, or?
There could be, I mean, we've limited it to 2, we only have 1 now, but it's quite a operation that Mr. Bernier has, and I don't know if anybody's want to go up against him.
Yeah.
Is there still infrastructure in that building for a food operation?
Oh, yeah, I mean, but it's gonna be tough, it's gonna be tough, the structure there is challenged, to say the least. And the owner is challenged in terms of, he's a, what do you call it, acorn off the original oak.
Is it not
He's
still
all-
owned by the family?
So
Still, that land is, the building's still owned by the Bitar family?
yes, that building, the white building adjoining it, building across the street and the barn are all his, and you should hear some of the things. I don't know, it's just, everything's kind of like, who's he, who's the.
Greg Guitar,
Greg Guitar.
it's one of the sons.
He is the oldest.
Does he live here in town? or-
There's another son.
There's another son.
Well, it depends upon how you want to refer to people, I think we're supposed to give her the right. Okay.
Well, one of his sons, when he got married, had a wedding announcement in the New York Times, and this story about their wedding, so.
Yes,
That was the other son.
That's the other.
that's the other, whatever.
The other child.
Them.
Okay, anything else? Anybody? Okay, all right. Thank you all. We're adjourned.
Thank you.